All right, so I'm going to show you how to get started working on Shiny for Python apps. So this is our website, at least the website in its current state. It will be changing in the future. You don't have to install Python and install Shiny and set up a virtual env and all that sort of stuff that you normally do for developing Python code. You can just go to our website and click on examples. There's an examples button here, or it's in the bar up here. So I just click on that. And this takes you right into this online Shiny for Python app editor. So we've got this app code here, and it's running the application over here. And I can make changes to this. I can say, everyone. And I click this button, I'll rerun it, and the app is running right here. Now, the really cool thing is that this is all running in the web browser. So this isn't running on a server. And you don't have to worry that if you change this code here, it's going to change something on our server. This is all running on your computer in your web browser. So you can feel free to experiment with things as much as you want. Now, over here, there's a whole bunch of different examples that you can look at. So it just starts off in this really basic one that has a slider and a text output. Right, I can move the slider and some of the stuff here changes. But if you want to see how to do other things, you can and explore the features of Shiny. You can look at the examples over on the side. So another basic example is an app with a plot. And it's asking me here, like, hey, do you want to discard all the changes to the files? Because I edited this app a little bit. But since I'm switching to another example, I'm just going to throw that away. And again, that won't hurt anything anywhere. It's just in case you wanted to keep the changes on your computer. That's why it's asking you. So here is an app with a plot, and I move a slider, and this histogram changes the number of bins. And just so you know, you can make this a little wider. The layout changes when it's really narrow. So this is a sidebar layout, and normally when the window is wide enough, it'll show the sidebar content on the side. But if you make it narrow, then it reflows it so it'll be on top. And that's so it'll be usable on mobile devices. We can look at there's other examples here. I'm just going to fly through some of these. So just so you get some idea of the things that you can do. So you can have an app that lets you upload files. And this shows the code for how to do an upload, downloads. I'll skip down to some of the inputs. So there's a lot of input and output components for Shiny. So this is a text input. And if I type some text here, so there, this input text gets used by the server code here, and it constructs the string and returns that, and then that gets rendered over here. All right, so there's other types of inputs like the numeric inputs, similar to the text input, sliders, checkboxes. If I check it, this value becomes true or false. Checkbox groups. So I can select multiple items and it'll give me a tuple with all the selected items. A select input, so like a drop-down box. Radio buttons. Text areas. So this is for multi-line text input. And there's date inputs and date ranges, and password inputs, where it will hide it in the browser, but that value gets sent to the server. So that's some of the inputs. So for the outputs, this is actually the same app as the input, because you type in something and then it sends it back it sends the output back to the web browser. So there's actually two varieties of this. There's the text output, and this is sort of normal HTML text. The verbatim text output, where it returns it as code, code formatted text. There's UI outputs, which let you display any sort of user interface components as HTML. This component here, this text input, is actually output generated dynamically in the server and then sent to the browser. So that's the UI that's being sent over. And plot outputs. So if you need to display tables, currently you can use a UI output, and if if you've got a pandas data frame, you can have it generate a table with a 2HTML method on those data frames. But hopefully by the, in the near future, we'll have a proper render table output. There's other fun little things here, like there's a couple different layout examples and some examples of how to use various reactive components. And then there's some more advanced applications that are put various things together. So here is a Wordle application that's written for Shiny. This is one that can use, if you load this on your phone, you can use your phone camera for input, and it can do image processing, something that lets you explore different types of visual illusions and play with the parameters. This is using a Python package called Pylusion. And so on. So there's all these different types of examples over here. Now let's try to build an application. So let's say we want to explore a data set, and we can use the Palmer Penguins data set. It's a fun and interesting data set to explore. So there is a Python package for this, and we can just try this out from here, from this interface. So I'll just go to this app with plot just so that I have an app that looks, or that's structured somewhat like what I want to do with this Palmer Penguins data set. I'm just going to type some code in here just to try it out to see if it works. So it's in a package on PyPI called Palmer Penguins. And the first thing that I want to do is see, can I install that package here? In this particular setting where we have Shiny running on Python in the browser, we can use a lot of Python packages, but not all of them. So if you want to find out if your particular Python package can work here, we have to use something called micropip that's specific to PyDide, which is Python in the browser. So what I'd say is import micropip and micropip.install Palmer Penguins. Now I've typed it up here. This is the code editor, and I can run it. I can take this, I can use this editor and run it line by line down here, or I can select the text and just run it all as blocks. If I select text, I can hit Command Enter, and it runs it down here. This is our Python. This is the Python console, and it looks like it installed it. So let's say import Palmer Penguins. Okay, yeah. So it installed it, and then now I imported it, and I could do stuff with it. So that's the first thing I need to do to see if it will install. What I can do now is I can say, click on this button. So this will open the project files that are currently open in a new window. Okay, so this is, there's only one file, it's just this app.py. And it's open in a new window here, and I can edit this here, but still go back to this window, or this tab, and browse the examples. Let's take a look at this Palmer Penguins data set first. So I'm just copying and pasting some code from the Palmer Penguins website on GitHub. So if I just load all this stuff like this. So again, I'm running it in the console here so that I can explore with I can explore the data a little bit before I go back to the app and actually try to put this code in the app. So penguins is equals load penguins, and then take a look at that. Okay, so this is a data frame with a bunch of columns and 344 rows. You know what? Why don't we just try putting a plot in here? So we have this histogram from this other thing that from the example, and let's just try replacing it with with a plot from Palmer Penguins data. Okay, so this is all. Let me move this import stuff all the way to the top here. And I will load this stuff. Okay, well, in here, I'm going to replace that plotting code. And let's see here. So let's try putting in a histogram. So return G. I'll delete this stuff. Let's see. So I've edited my app, and I can just hit the play button there and rerun it. Okay, error, the palette list has the wrong number of colors. Let's see, that is because I played with that a little bit before I pasted it in there. Let's try this again. Okay, so here we have a histogram of these different penguins, of the 3 different species of penguins, and their body masses. So we can see that there's a lot of Adelie penguins, and they tend to be smaller than the Gentoo penguins. And there's also chinstrap penguins, which look like they're have roughly the same distribution of body mass as the adelic ones. So that's kind of interesting. The reason the colors are funny is because they're semi-transparent here, and this is they're overlaid on top of each other. But let's say we want to explore the histogram for each species individually. Let's try filtering out by species and creating an input that lets you choose which species you want to see the histogram for. Okay, so in order to do that, let's take this. We don't need the slider anymore. We don't need this text output. So instead of the slider, we want to add UI.input select. We'll call it species. And this is our label here, choose a species. And I'm going to refer back to the examples just to see how this works, because I might have trouble remembering it off the top of my head how to use the select input. So yeah, we don't need that. So actually, you know what I should do is I'll just copy and paste this. So I'll take this input select. Instead of typing in there, I'll just paste that there, and I can modify how I see fit. So again, we're going to call this species. And so on the left here of each of these key value pairs, this is the key. This is what we'll use. It'll show up in the code down here, and this is the text that will be displayed in the browser. So, but I'm actually going to use a shortcut. So I know that you don't actually have to do it that way. If you want the label and the value to be the same, you can just say the deli. You can give it a list instead of a dict there. Gentoo chinstrap. Okay. And now if I want to filter out, use this input to filter out the data, I can do something like this. I can say, let's call this my filter data. I'll call it P equals penguins. And equals input.species. And then I have to put parentheses there because I'm invoking this as a function. So this input.species, that corresponds to this species up here. That's how I fetch the value. Okay, so then I'll take, I'm storing this in P, so I want to plot P. And if I rerun this app, I'll get the error. The palette list has the wrong number of colors because there's 3 colors here, but there's only one species now that it's being filtered. So I think I'm just going to try commenting that out and see if this works. So that was, I used a key press for that, a keyboard shortcut. That was Command/, but you can just, put a pound sign in the front. And here we go. This is the histogram for the Delhi penguins. Let's see if this actually works. Gentoo, nice. And chinstrap. Okay, cool. So one thing that's not so great about this particular app is that the x-axis keeps shifting and the y-axis as well. So it's hard to compare them across species here. But I won't bother trying to fix that right now. But you can see here that this is a really nice way of being able to explore your data interactively. And we did that by just starting with the examples over here and just copying and pasting code that we needed. And I can clean this up. There's a few other things that were not needed anymore. There's reactive calc and this render text. All we really need here is this plot. I used the Palmer Penguins data set, but I actually installed it manually using micropip earlier. It's continuing to work because it's still running the same Python session where Palmer Penguins was installed. But if I were to take this and open this in a new window, let's see what it does. This is a new Python session that doesn't have Palmer Penguins installed. And it says there's an error starting app, no module named Palmer Penguins. There's a way to fix that. Let me close this. And that's by adding a requirements.text. So it's the same format as what you'd normally use in Python. So I'd call it requirements.text. And I clicked on this plus to create a new file, and then I renamed it up here. It starts with by default with some Python content in it, but we'll just delete that. And I'll just say Palmer Penguins here. That should be all that I need. And now I'll try opening it again in a new window. And because it's in the requirements.txt, when when this app loads, it'll go and it'll install that package from PyPI. So, and here we are. It's showing, it has the data set and we can explore it. And after I've been working on it, I might want to save the work that I've done. So I can do that by clicking on this button, save all project files to disk. Now, this is currently only supported in Chrome and in Microsoft Edge browsers. It doesn't work in Safari or Firefox right now, but I'll show you what you can do if you're using those browsers. So I can save all project files to disk. It'll ask me if I'm sure I want to do this. And then I select a directory on disk. I'll just create a new directory for this. I'll call this Penguins. Create that. And I'm selecting the whole directory, so not individual files. So I'm in the directory that I want, which is called Penguins, hit select, and it saved the files there. So in the future, if I come back to this, this editor or the examples page, let me just open up another editor here. And it starts with the default basic app. But if I want to load my previous work, I can just click on this button here to load a project. And it'll ask me if I'm sure I want to do this, to close all the current files. And I've selected the Penguins directory. And there, it loaded the files. It loaded them in a different order up here, but they're all still here, and it's running the app. Now, if you are using Firefox or Safari, another thing you can do is just click on this download button, and this will download the file to your download directory. And if there's multiple files, it'll put them into a zip file, and then it just saved it there. All right, so after you've been working on this app and you've got something cool you want to share with somebody, you can click on this share button here. This creates a share link, and with this URL here, if I click on copy, and then I can send this to somebody. Now it's 937 bytes long, so it's a reasonable size. It's not too big. And if I paste it up here, somebody else can visit this URL and they get this same interface where they can edit the code and see the app running over here. Or you can just copy this application URL, which is just the app by itself, running by itself without the editor and the terminal down there. And I'll paste it here. And here it is. Here's my app just running by itself. Again, that whole thing is just encoded directly in the URL. So for this particular case, we're using some packages like Seaborn and Pandas. And then these ones are included with our distribution, which includes Shiny, and it's built on top of Pyodide. But because we had to add Polymer Penguins to the requirements.txt, it actually goes and it fetches that from the PyPI repository. So every time somebody visits this website, this URL, it has to go out and fetch that package. So just bear that in mind. So let's say I've shared this application with somebody, and they want to experiment with it, right? In this tab, I've loaded this app from that URL, and let's just say I'm another person who's now playing with this code. So, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, this stuff isn't necessary here. Let's clean that up. Let's change the text a little bit. Like, let's say, which penguins are your favorite? All right, let's delete that. Oh, and let's clean up this palette thing because we don't need that anymore. You can there's also a button here to reformat the code. So let's just do that to make it look a little cleaner and nicer, and hit play. Okay, so which penguins are your favorite? Somebody else can play with it, make some changes, and they can click on the share link, and it, again, encodes this app code into the URL, and then they can pass that on to somebody else. So let's do that. Let's load that here. So all that extra code at the top is gone, and that commented out part is gone, and it says which penguins are your favorite. You can explore Shiny this way. Again, you can edit it. You can go back to the example browser to see if you want to try something different, like, instead of the select input, I want to do radio buttons. Functionally, they're very similar, but the interface is different. The user interface is different. But let's just put that here. You put radio buttons. I think this should just work. Yeah, so you can just choose a deli, Gentoo, Chinstrap. It does the same sort of thing. And you can look at other examples to see, to try different things. Like if you want people to be able to upload data, you can look at this example. If you want to fetch data from a remote API, there's another example here that shows how to do that. So, you can fetch data and put it in your app. And you can go back and forth between these examples here and the code that you're editing, which is over here now. All right, and after you're all done with that, you can save your work and work in a normal Python development environment where you have Python installed on your computer and Shiny, and then you run Shiny from the command line, and that allows a greater range of things that you can do than when you run it in the browser. But running it in the browser is a really nice way to just get started and try it out without having to go through the trouble of installing a whole bunch of packages.